Hi, my name is Lara Storm. I'm a consultant.
And hi, my name is Heather Kipnis, and I'm also an independent consultant.
And we are here today to talk about the USAID's Development Credit Authority program, looking specifically at women-owned SMEs and their representation in the DCA portfolio. So looking at which partners in which countries are lending to women, what percentages of those loans are going to women, and how those loans compare to men-owned SMEs.
We've also taken a deep dive into two particular DCA credit guarantees, one in Ethiopia and one in Ghana.
So I looked at the database of DCA-backed loans to SMEs, and what we found was we had a sample size of about over 19,000 loans to SMEs. What we found was a very small representation of women-owned SMEs within that broader portfolio, both in terms of numbers of borrowers. They're about 18% of the entire borrower base was women-owned SMEs, and the gap was actually even larger when we looked at portfolio. So there was a $523 million portfolio, and women-owned SMEs only had just under 10% representation in that portfolio. So that huge gap between the genders, we believe, has a lot to do with some of these survey results that are coming out looking at specific characteristics of women-owned SMEs. And what we found is that the access issue to financial services, women have greater barriers to access of financial services, could be due to regulatory requirements, loan terms, very difficult loan terms for women, could be due to lower skill sets or lower education levels, limited business experience, and of course that would go into the actual bias of banks towards women-owned SMEs for those reasons. So very important to look at some of those limiting factors to be able to improve programming and create more targeted programming to support women-owned SMEs. Two interesting sort of takeaways from looking at that database were looking at sectors. So we did a breakdown of women-owned SMEs and men-owned SMEs across different types of sectors. And what we found, we looked at median loan size between women-owned and men-owned SMEs, and found that in three different sectors, women-owned SMEs had actually higher median loan sizes. So those were in education, construction, and information and communication technologies. Granted, they were relatively small samples, but could be worth looking at more in depth in terms of a more qualitative research to understand what the successes are, why these women were taking out larger loans than their male counterparts. Another issue that we found was that women-owned SMEs with between 6 and 100 employees actually had higher median loan sizes than their men-owned SME counterparts, and they also had lower arrears. So again, relatively small sample that we were looking at, but also perhaps a promising example for future programming. And Heather, I know you looked specifically at some of these findings on a country basis.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, we looked at Ghana and Ethiopia, and two very different DCA credit guarantees. In Ethiopia, it specifically focuses on targeting women-owned SMEs, versus in Ghana, women-owned SMEs aren't necessarily a target, but they had a high participation rate in the DCA credit guarantee, and that particular case study the DCA guarantee focused on the low-income private schools that are also SMEs. So, and building on some of the challenges that you mentioned, we actually found those to be common within the case studies as well. So the low levels of education, there's a shortage of managerial and technical skills, the businesses tend to be smaller, and the women have less experience in running the businesses. But one thing that did come up quite prevalently in both of the case studies with collateral requirements, and the research does show that that women are disproportionately affected by collateral requirements, and this is attributed to property rights. And so this came up with both Ethiopia with a commercial bank and in Ghana with a microfinance organization. So that's one key takeaway for the case studies. And then a second key takeaway is around the business case. This constantly comes up when we're talking about women-owned SMEs and why financial institutions should focus on women. And the case studies, what was interesting, went beyond the data. So beyond the research around that women tend to have higher repayment rates, but it focused on that women tend to communicate more proactively, and this increased the bank's perception that women are a creditworthy segment.